Blackfish was released back in January 2013 and is the most horrific documentary I have ever seen. For those of you who have not seen it, it explores the life of Tilikum, an orca that was kept in captivity for 34 years before his death in 2017, and who was involved in the death of 3 people. It gives an insight into the psychological damage done to orcas during their capture and incarceration in an environment that is totally inadequate for their needs. Tilikum was at SeaWorld Orlando when the last 2 deaths occurred and when the film was released. Soon after the film was aired, SeaWorld suffered a $15.9 million loss, attendance for the first 9 months declined by 5%, and by August 2014, SeaWorld's stock prices had dropped by 33%. The film made people realise that these intelligent, sentient and highly social mammals had no place being held in captivity in tiny pools and performing for our pleasure. The film was a catalyst that has brought about real change and some protection for our wild orcas, at least in some places in the world. This video has been a long time coming. I first had the idea last June when I heard the fantastic news that Canada was bringing in legislation banning whales, dolphins and porpoises from being bred or held in captivity. According to one organisation called Change for Animals, there are currently at least 2,360 cetaceans in captivity worldwide, 2,000 dolphins, 227 beluga and 53 orca, with more than 5,000 cetaceans having died in captivity since the 1950s. Wikipedia has a tragic list of all the orcas that are in captivity in the world. I counted 62, which is more than cited above. Some of them were captured from the wild and some have been born in captivity. One of the entries I found very difficult to bear. It is of an orca who was born the same year as me and was captured when she was only 4. At 55, she is the longest held captive orca in the world. She has been pregnant 7 times, but if the pregnancies lasted to full term, none of her calves survived more than 2 months. But increasingly, there is public demand for this to change, as seen by Canada's announcement. Unfortunately, any cetaceans already in captivity in Canada will remain so, and any cetaceans needing rehabilitation from injury are also exempt. Cetaceans can also be held for the purposes of licensed scientific research. Maryland Amusement Park and Zoo at Canada's Niagara Falls is considered the last Canadian park committed to keeping cetaceans in captivity. It has 55 beluga whales, 5 bottlenose dolphins and 1 orca. These cetaceans will have to live out their lives in captivity, but at least they will not be joined by any others. In January 2018, Vancouver Aquarium announced that it was no longer going to keep cetaceans. This was before the ban was announced in June, and it was all down to mounting public opposition of them keeping cetaceans in captivity. An announcement from the park board said, "The public told us they believed the continuing importation and display of these intelligent and sociable mammals was unethical and incompatible with evolving public opinion. At the present time, the aquarium has 1 dolphin remaining, which is incredibly sad for that dolphin." Whilst this news is exciting and to be celebrated, the rest of the world also needs to get its act together. In the UK, there have been no cetaceans for a number of years. In the 1970s, there were more than 30 dolphinariums in the UK, housing about 300 dolphins. At one point, Windsor Safari Park had 2 orcas, Winnie and Nemo. In 1986, Nemo died, and eventually Winnie was transferred to SeaWorld Orlando in 1991. She died in 2002 at SeaWorld Antonio. By the 1980s, only 5 dolphinariums were left, and in 1985, a review of dolphinariums in the UK revealed major inadequacies in the conditions under which cetaceans were being kept. In 1987, a joint report by the Born Free Foundation and the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society exposed the poor conditions in which many of Britain's dolphins were kept. And in 1991, following an animal rights campaign called Into the Blue, the government made standards of care so stringent, no dolphinarium in the country could afford to meet them, and so the last remaining dolphinariums closed. There is little information as to what happened to the cetaceans in these dolphinariums. I can only assume that they were transferred to dolphinariums abroad, but I did find this joyful piece of information. 3 bottlenose dolphins, Rocky, Missy and Silver, were relocated to a rehabilitation sea pen and then released in the Turks and Caicos Islands in September 1991. Within days, Rocky was seen swimming with a pod of wild dolphins. I like to imagine the same happened to Missy and Silver and that they have had a good life. In fact, bottlenose dolphins can live to be about 60 years old, so they could still be out there swimming around. So well done, the UK. But it isn't actually illegal to keep cetaceans in the UK. Given the right conditions, one could open. However, public opinion suggests that this would not be the big tourist trap it used to be, and so would not be economically viable. Last July, Virgin Holidays, a company owned by the British Virgin Group, announced that it was no longer offering and promoting excursions to attractions and experiences featuring captive whales and dolphins. This meant breaking its ties with SeaWorld's 5 sites, which SeaWorld were not best pleased about. Virgin Holidays are instead going to focus on encouraging customers to see these creatures in the wild, another step in the right direction. In fact, Virgin Holidays had already announced back in April 2018 that it was going to invest $3 million in conjunction with the National Aquarium in Baltimore to create the first dolphin sanctuary in America. The aquarium has 7 dolphins, which it wants to rehome from their indoor aquarium to an outdoor setting off the coast of Florida or in the Caribbean. This decision was as a direct result of the film Blackfish. They had set a target of 2020 to find the perfect spot, but have encountered some problems. They have surveyed over 50 sites, but have not found one that has been safe enough. They all have problems such as fierce storms and algal blooms, which will only get worse as the ocean temperatures rise due to climate change. They are not giving up though, and continue in their search. SeaWorld has also become more enlightened, and in 2016 it announced that it will no longer be breeding orcas in captivity, and its orca shows will be carrying a conservation message inspiring people to act. It hasn't added a captured orca for years, so over time there will be no orcas at SeaWorld. In September 2016, the Governor of California signed the Orca Protection and Safety Act into law, which bans the breeding of orcas in captivity, as well as the circus-like shows that have them performing for crowds. Although SeaWorld had already said they were going to do this, the legislation was still important to make sure that SeaWorld can't change its mind, and that no other Californian park can breed or do non-educational orca shows in the future. There is a project called the Whale Sanctuary Project, which is led by a group of marine mammal scientists, veterinarians, policy experts and engineers. The aim is to establish large seaside sanctuaries for retired or rescued cetaceans. The animals would live in cordoned-off habitats in the ocean while still being cared for and fed by humans. The group has identified potential sites in British Columbia, Washington State and Nova Scotia. It is hoped that they would eventually partner with SeaWorld, but SeaWorld opposes the concept of sea sanctuaries, referring to them as sea cages and saying that environmental hazards and a radically new environment would likely cause tremendous stress to their orcas and do more harm than good. Tragically, even with many parts of the world not buying captured orcas anymore, the practice still continues. In the summer of 2018, 4 Russian companies captured 11 orcas and 87 belugas from the Sea of Orcas. They were then transported more than 1,300 kilometers south, where they were then held in cramped enclosures in Srednyaya Bay in Russia's Far East. It was feared they were going to be sold to China. Orcas can fetch millions of dollars, and belugas are sold for tens of thousands of dollars. Drone footage of the enclosures highlighted the plight of these cetaceans and sparked outrage worldwide. Regional authorities opened an investigation into the alleged illegal capture of the marine mammals and found that it was indeed illegal, and the companies were given a hefty fine. But while the investigation was taking place, the cetaceans had to remain in their pens. A team of experts was brought in to assess the situation, and in April 2019, a report was prepared by Jean-Michel Cousteau and a team from the Whale Sanctuary Project. The health and well-being of the cetaceans was of concern. Conditions were cramped, and many were suffering from skin issues and/or mouth ulcers, indicative of other potential health problems. They also reported that there was no reason why the cetaceans could not be released back into the wild. There were concerns as to whether the cetaceans would be able to fend for themselves and reintegrate with other pods after spending a year trapped in the pens and having their food provided for them. Some of the belugas were only a few months old when they were captured and taken from their families. For their release, they were divided into groups where there were younger ones and older ones to support the younger ones which may not have learnt how to fish before they were taken from their mothers. It was a long journey, starting with each animal being lifted in a sling from its pen and into a giant tub filled with water. They were then driven hundreds of kilometres north to the Armor River. There, the tubs were loaded onto large barges for a 6-night trip winding down the river before finally reaching the ocean. At times the journey by truck was so bumpy, workers had to climb into the tubs to stroke the orcas to try and keep them calm. Over the summer of 2019, 2 to 3 orcas were released together, and there is lovely footage on the Whale Sanctuary Project website of 3 orcas swimming together in the open ocean. It has also been reported that one of the orcas, who had been part of the first group of orcas released on June the 27th, had been seen hunting and sharing food with a group of wild orcas. Many of the cetaceans were released back into the wild from where they had been captured, but 50 belugas were released into Uspenia Bay, which is not a native habitat for beluga whales, but was the best option due to the deteriorating weather conditions and funding issues. The whole operation took 4.5 months, and by November 2019, all of the cetaceans had been released back into the wild. The other good news is that the Russian Deputy Prime Minister said that Russia will clamp down on the capture of cetaceans. It will change the law that currently allows capture of cetaceans for educational and cultural purposes, a loophole that fisheries in Russia have long used to legally capture belugas and orcas for use in aquariums in Russia and abroad, mostly China. Most of the world now accepts that it is unethical to capture any cetacean, get them to perform circus-like tricks, and breed them in captivity, and are keen to prevent this from continuing to happen, which is fabulous news. However, China has other ideas, something I will be discussing in another video.